Hi guys, welcome back to my channel. If you're new here, my name is Tiffany, but you can call me Tiff. And if you're watching this, this is a tasty True Crime Tuesday. And basically what that means is I eat some food and I tell you about a true crime case that I've been researching. So today I've got sushi and I'm absolutely starving Marvin. So I got some edamame beans because I love them, delicious. And I just got some, and then I just got some of these. I can never pronounce any of the names right, so I'm not even going to bother trying, okay? No. I've got some miso soup, and I got these mango mochi, I think they're called, or the little moon things. So I want to try those. And if you've watched a few of these, you know that I always have to have a taste before we jump into the case. I have to. So I'm going to give the miso soup a go first, actually. So much flavour.
That is amazing. Wow. Like, oh my God.
Okay, now I'm going to have some sushi. I don't know why I said it like that. That was yummy. I don't actually understand how people can't like sushi. It's so nice and refreshing. I'm going to try one of the salmon ones now. No. They put like wasabi in it. Why? Just ruined it. Oh. I left the salmon stuff because I don't like the wasabi. But I finished the soup and I finished the edamame beans. So I want to try this as well, really quickly. The mango cheesecake mochi. I hope I'm saying that right. Okay. They feel so bizarre. Oh my God, they feel so weird. Oh my God, they smell amazing though. Right, okay.
That is amazing. Wow. Like, oh my God.
That is beautiful. It's like, you know, like a Solero. It tastes like a Solero, but just more creamy. 10 out of 10, these are delicious. Okay, now that I've stuffed my face and I feel really sick and full, let's get on to today's case. And in today's case, we're going to be discussing the abduction and murder of Dorothy Scott. Dorothy Scott was a 30-year-old woman that just seemed to disappear into thin air one evening, and then 3 months later her remains were actually found by a construction worker, and to this day we don't know who killed Dorothy or why. Dorothy Scott was born on the 24th of April 1948 to John and Vera Scott, and Dorothy grew up in a city called Anaheim, I think that's how you say it, and it's located in Southern California. In 1976, Dorothy gave birth to her only child, and this was a son, and she decided to call this little boy Sean. Now, from what I can gather from my research, it seems like Sean's father wasn't really in the picture. He lived in Missouri, which is around 2,000 miles away, so he didn't really have a lot of interaction with Sean or Dorothy. So Dorothy and Sean actually lived with Dorothy's auntie, and they lived in a small town called Stanton, and Stanton was about 20 minutes away from Anaheim. And Dorothy was very, very close to her family. She was very family orientated. She loved her parents, and Sean had an incredible relationship with his grandparents, Vera and John, and that was to do with the fact that they actually looked after Sean while Dorothy was working during the week, so he was really, really close to them. Dorothy worked as a secretary for 2 jointly owned shops, and one of these shops was called the Swingers Psych Shop, and the other shop was called the Custom John's Head Shop. And the Swingers Psych Shop, from what I can gather, it had like a very hippie feel to it. So it would sell a lot of incense, a lot of lava lamps, a lot of psychedelic things. And the Custom John's Head Shop, that was actually part owned by John. Dorothy's father. And from what I can tell, Dorothy was really well liked at both of these shops. All of her colleagues said that Dorothy was really dependable and she was really organised and just overall really nice person. And Dorothy was also described by her friends and family as being a fantastic mum to Sean. Like, she was just incredible, and she wouldn't go out partying on the weekends, like going for a drink. She wouldn't take drugs, she wouldn't stay out late. Instead, she'd give all of her time to Sean and also to her faith, because she was very involved within the Christian faith. So the 28th of May 1980 started out like any other day for Dorothy. She got up, she got ready for work, she then went into Sean's bedroom, she woke Sean up, got him ready, and then she got him in the car and they drove to her parents' house, which is around 20 minutes away. And when she got to her parents' house, she told them that she was going to be late that night because the Swingers Psych Shop was having a staff meeting at 9 p.m. So she was going to be a little bit late, but not to worry, she would be back. And that was it. She said goodbye, she gave Sean a kiss on the head, and she jumped in the car and she went to work. Her day at work went smoothly, it went absolutely fine. And then soon enough, it was time for the staff meeting. And at this staff meeting, one of Dorothy's colleagues, his name was Comrade Bostron, he started complaining of really bad arm pain, and his arm was like all swollen and red, and it was clear that he probably needed to go and see a doctor. And because Dorothy was just such a kind person, Dorothy and another colleague called Pam Head actually offered to accompany Conrad to the hospital. So they decided to get in the car, and before going to the hospital, Dorothy actually decided to go back to her parents' home really quickly, just to let them know what was going on, because back in those days they didn't have WhatsApp, they didn't have mobile phones or texting, nothing like that. So she decided to drive back to her parents really quickly and just tell them what was going on, and she wanted to let them know that I'm probably going to be home really late, but don't worry, like, I'm just with them. And then after she told her parents that she was going to be late, she got back in the car and she drove all three of them, so Conrad, Pam and herself, to the UC Irvine Medical Centre. And here Conrad was seen by a doctor. So he was seen by a doctor. Pam and Dorothy were just sitting in the waiting room, just waiting for Conrad to come out and say we can go. So Conrad was fixed up, and the doctor actually said, like, I've got a prescription, I think probably for antibiotics, and he said go and collect them from the pharmacy and then you can go on your way. So Pam actually decided to go with Conrad to pick up the prescription, but Dorothy had said that she wanted to use the bathroom, and then she was going to go and get the car and bring the car to the entrance of the hospital, so Conrad didn't have to walk very far because he still felt a bit poorly. And this was the last time that anyone ever saw Dorothy ever again. So Conrad and Pam went to pick up Conrad's prescription, and then they made their way back to the entrance of the hospital to wait for Dorothy. And when they originally got outside, Dorothy was nowhere to be seen, and they were a bit confused by this because it'd been about 20 minutes, so they were thinking, like, by now she should have got the car and she should have brought it back. And then they actually saw Dorothy's white 1973 Toyota station wagon, so they was like, oh, here, there she is. But it was really strange because the headlights were on full beam, so like they were up full, and it wasn't foggy, so they were just really baffled by this, and they couldn't really see properly because it was like blinding them. And then instead of the car like slowing down to where they was, it was speeding up, and eventually it just sped straight past them. And because the headlights were on full beam and because it was going quite fast, they couldn't actually see who was driving the car. But anyway, the car sped by them, went straight past them, and they were thinking, well, like, what on earth, like, what's going on, like, why has she just done that? So they actually decided to go back into the hospital and just wait there. And from what I've read, they waited there for a couple of hours. In this day and age, you would think that was quite bizarre, because you'd be like, well, why don't you just jump in a taxi and go home? But we need to remember, back in those days, they didn't have Uber, they didn't have Bolt, they couldn't just jump in a taxi and get home. Dorothy's car was her only means of transport. Like, she was going to take them there, she was going to take them home. So they actually decided to call Dorothy's parents, because they were like, this is really strange, like, she hasn't come back to collect us, like, maybe something's wrong. So they decided to call John and Vera and ask, did she return, did she pick up Sean? And Vera and John said, no, like, she's not here, that we haven't seen her, we thought she was still with you. So they decided to wait at the hospital for a little while longer just to see if she would return, and she didn't. So in the end, they actually decided to contact the police, because they just thought the circumstances around it was just so strange. Like, Dorothy wasn't the type of person just like, yeah, I'll come and get you, and then just not bother, and then just leave without saying anything. Like, it just wasn't the person she was. If she said she was going to do something, she was going to do it. So Pam and Conrad contacted the police, and they told the police what had happened, and the police just didn't seem to care. They wasn't bothered at all. Their attitude was, well, she's an adult, it's fine, like, I'm sure she'll show up. But then this all changed very quickly when 5 hours later, Dorothy's car, so the white station wagon, was actually found in a place called Santa Ana. And from looking at the maps now, it's saying this is about a 15-minute drive. Maybe then it wasn't a 15-minute drive, but from what I could see today, it was a 15-minute drive. So it wasn't that far. But anyway, they actually located Dorothy's car in Santa Ana, and it had been left abandoned in an alleyway, and it had been set on fire. So when the police located her car and they saw it had been abandoned and set on fire, I think this is when alarm bells started to ring. This is when they started to think something's not right here. But unfortunately, this was too little too late, because just 3 months later, on the 6th of August 1984, human remains were actually found, and they were actually found next to canine remains as well. It was like they'd been placed next to each other. And the police actually found at the scene a turquoise ring and a wristwatch, and the police showed these belongings to Vera, Dorothy's mother, and Vera confirmed that these belongings did belong to Dorothy, but they wanted to confirm 100% that these remains were Dorothy's. So they sent them off for forensic testing, and it did come back as they did belong to Dorothy. So now the police aren't just looking for a missing person or someone that's been abducted. Now it's murder. Someone killed her intentionally. But the one thing they could never ever find out was like the canine remains. Who did this dog belong to? Because Dorothy didn't have a dog. There was no mention of the dog from Pam or Conrad. Vera and John said that she never had a dog. So a lot of people seem to think that this dog actually belonged to the killer. But I really don't know. So the police started their murder investigation, and after they spoke to Dorothy's friends and family, they learned very quickly that Dorothy had been receiving very weird phone calls from an unknown man, and it had been going on for a couple of months now. And Vera actually told the police that Dorothy had told her she recognised the voice, but she just couldn't put the voice to a face, if that makes sense. She knew that she recognised the voice, but she couldn't actually pinpoint and say, oh yeah, it was him or it was him. And the calls that Dorothy would receive were they would just go from one extreme to the other. So in some calls, this man would tell Dorothy how much he adored her, how much he loved her, that he wanted to care for her, he wanted to be for her. And then he would call again a few days later or the next day and tell her that he wanted to murder her and that he hated her. So it was just mixed messages, to say the least. And then the call started to get even more terrifying, because then this man would start describing details to Dorothy about her day that day. So he would tell her things about herself, what she was wearing, what she'd been doing that day, that only he could have known if he was watching her, which is just absolutely terrifying. And Vera actually told the police about one call that just petrified Dorothy. Apparently the man called Dorothy up and basically told her that he wanted to cut her up into tiny little pieces so that no one would ever find her. And Vera said that this just completely shook Dorothy up. I mean, from the first call I would have been a fucking hot mess, to be honest, but I can't even imagine receiving those calls. And Dorothy actually decided to start taking karate. Was it karate? Yeah, so Dorothy actually decided to start taking karate lessons because I think it made her feel a bit stronger, a bit more powerful. She thought she'd be able to defend herself if anyone did try and hurt her. And she was also thinking about buying a gun, but I don't think she actually did it. So after Dorothy's remains were discovered and identified to actually belong to Dorothy, of course the family were just absolutely devastated. Right? Sean had just lost his mother and Vera and John had just lost their daughter. But do you think that this stopped Dorothy's stalker from reaching out? Oh no, he thrived on this. He absolutely thrived on it. So the first call actually came a week after Dorothy's disappearance. Vera was at home by herself and she got a call and she answered, and the man on the other end of the line said, "Are you related to Dorothy Scott?" So Vera replied, "Yes, I am." And then he just replied, "I've got her," and hung up. Vera obviously contacted the police and told them what had happened. And the police had been looking for Dorothy, but they hadn't come up with any leads. They didn't know where she'd gone. They just found her car at this point. Vera told the detectives or the police about this phone call. So to them, they got quite, not excited, but they felt like this could really help them, because every other lead that they'd followed, it had just been a dead end. But this was like a proper lead that they had now. They could actually look into this and try and figure out who this call came from. But sadly, they couldn't figure it out. They didn't know where the call had come from and who it was. Didn't bring any answers. So even though the police seem to be having a really hard time identifying the caller, they actually told Vera and John not to go to the media because they said it would hurt the investigation. And at first, Vera and John, they did listen to the police, but after a while, I think they was just getting fed up because they just thought, you're not getting anywhere, you're not doing anything. You don't seem to be getting any leads. We need some information. So John actually decided to reach out to a magazine, and he decided to reach out to the Orange County Register, which is a newspaper. Oh, sorry, I said magazine. It's a newspaper, and this newspaper is actually still running today. Like, I looked at it online, and it was quite fascinating to think that there was an article in there about Dorothy's case. So John approached the Orange County Register and they actually ran the story about Dorothy's abduction, well, suspected abduction, and that she was missing and if anyone had information to come forward. And this seemed to really rile up whoever had taken Dorothy. This person was clearly keeping a very close eye, and this person actually decided to contact the editor of the newspaper. The editor was called Pat Riley, and whoever this unknown man was on the other end of the phone, he told Pat, "I killed her. I killed Dorothy Scott. She was my love. I caught her cheating with another man. She denied having someone else. I killed her." The weird thing is, Dorothy didn't have a boyfriend. Her parents said that she didn't have time to have a boyfriend. She focused all of her energy and her time on Sean and church. There wasn't any way that she was with someone without them knowing. There is a possibility, you can never say never, but they didn't believe that there was anyone involved in Dorothy's life that they didn't know about. And Vera and John just believed that this guy, whoever he was just absolutely delusional. Like, he convinced himself that he was with Dorothy when he wasn't. The police kept looking into leads, they kept trying to figure out who this man was, but eventually days turned into weeks, weeks turned into months, months turned into years, and the case just went absolutely cold. They couldn't find anyone that they thought could be connected to Dorothy's abduction. They did look into Sean's father, but it turns out that he was in Missouri. Like I said earlier, he lived in Missouri. It turned out that he was there on the night of her abduction, or she went missing, and he could prove that he was there the whole time. So he was completely ruled out. But apart from Sean's father, there wasn't anyone else the police or Dorothy's family or friends could think of that would do this. And the one thing that I find so brazen about this person is they actually kept tormenting Vera and John. The phone calls, they carried on for 4 years. 4 years consecutively, this person would ring Vera, it was almost like they knew their routine, because they would never call when John was there. It was always when Vera was on her own, and they would just torment Vera. They would just say things like, I killed Dorothy, I killed her, I had her, over and over again. But then one time they slipped up and they called when John was home. And when John answered, this seemed to really spook whoever it was, because they didn't call again for a couple of months, but then eventually the calls started to pick up again. And the police did try and trace these phone calls to, you know, try and figure out who the hell this person was, but they could never keep this person on the phone long enough, so they could actually never trace the calls. And the police to this day have never formally said there were any suspects in the case. They've never named anybody. Now, even though the police never named any suspects, I've seen one name pop up over and over again, and this name is Mike Butler. Now, Mike Butler worked as a mechanic, either next door or opposite Dorothy's work. So he would have seen Dorothy every single day. He would have got to know her routine, because you do. When you work in close proximity with people, you do start to learn their routine, because you just see them every day. And his sister, Mike's sister, also worked with Dorothy at the shops, so he could have easily come into the shop to speak to his sister, and maybe that's why Dorothy felt like she recognised the voice. But I just want to say again, the police never named Mike as a suspect. This is just a name that I've seen keep popping up from my research. I mean, it is very likely that he could have been watching her from across the street while he was working and she was working, but we'll never know. Vera and John and Sean have never received any justice for Dorothy. They don't know why this happened. They don't know who did it. Poor Sean, he lost his mother so brutally for no reason. And I genuinely believe whoever did this to Dorothy, they became infatuated with her, and they almost convinced themselves that Dorothy was theirs and she belonged to them, and if they couldn't have her, no one else could have her. Maybe on the night that she went missing, they saw her take Conrad to the hospital, and you know when someone's not feeling well, like you rub their arm like to make sure that they're okay. Maybe this person saw Dorothy touch Conrad in a way that they felt was just inappropriate, and it got them really angry, and then they decided to murder her. But it seems like we'll never know, sadly, why Dorothy's life was taken so brutally for no reason. And Mike Butler actually died in 2014, and it's always been said that Mike has never confessed to anything. He's never discussed Dorothy's case. So then again, it makes you think, surely maybe he would have said something. I don't know. There's people that do things and don't say anything at all, ever. So you just don't know, do you? But that's all I've got for you today, guys. Is if there's any cases you'd like to see me cover, please just leave a comment in the comments section. Yeah, like the box below. If there's anything you want to see me eat, you can also put that down in the comment box as well. And yeah, I hope you enjoyed this video, guys, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye.